There was some great news for Apple stock investors as President Donald Trump announced an easing of tariffs placed on China. And as you might already know, Apple has a strong manufacturing presence in China, an assembly presence in China. And so the easing of relations is certainly to be great news for Apple stock investors. This video, I'll talk a little bit about that and incorporate how the company's latest earnings call, where the CFO discussed and the CEO discussed the plans the company has initiated and the exposure of its manufacturing and its supply chain risk. And I'll discuss how Apple's done a great job in easing investor concerns during these volatile times. I've thought that Apple's communication across the board has been excellent in a risky situation. They've really communicated well to ease investor concerns. So I'm going to share with you some more detail about its business and its prospects. I want to thank The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now. So Apple said, looking ahead, they expected their June quarter total company revenue to grow low to mid single digits year over year. And if you didn't already know what this means when management says low to mid single digits, what do they mean precisely? So management teams, when they say low single digits, they mean 1%, 2%, or 3%. When they say mid single digits, they mean 4%, 5%, or 6%. And high single digits is 7, 8, or 9%, if you didn't already know. So when they say low to mid single digits, I take that to mean, in the midpoint of those low to mid ranges. So 2.5%, 3.5%, or 4.5% is what I would take this to mean for the upcoming quarter in terms of revenue growth. They also said that their gross profit margin is expected to be 46% at the midpoint, which includes the estimated impact of $900 million on tariff-related costs. And that was great news for investors to hear for a business that does, billions, almost $100 billion a year in cash flow from operations to experience only $900 million of tariff-related costs for the upcoming quarter was great for investors to hear. Management also noted that this isn't something that you should project forward, that things are likely to get worse looking ahead if things didn't change. But as I mentioned in the introduction of the video, things did change. The US and China agreed to a pause on these tariffs, and there's some optimism that these tariffs will be reduced, mitigated, or hopefully even negotiated down closer to 10 or 20% from the 145% levels that were initially reported after the back and forth tit for tat tariffs were going on between the US and China. There was also reports that President Donald Trump spoke to Apple CEO Tim Cook following the pause. And so that was also positive for Apple stock investors. So the biggest risks between these tariffs and Apple, I think, have been reduced, and that's great news. Now, for the June quarter, Apple did expect the majority of iPhones sold in the US will have India as the country of origin and Vietnam to be the country of origin for almost all iPad, Mac, Apple Watch, and AirPods products sold in the US. Now, China would continue to be the country of origin for the vast majority of their total product sales outside of the United States. And if you remember, when I previewed Apple's earnings, I said that this is something that they could do. They have that flexibility to do just what I talked about, and that's what they're doing, using the China production to fulfill orders outside of the United States, and then using the India and Vietnam production to fulfill all the orders inside the United States. And the 90-day pause that was negotiated this morning or negotiated over the weekend but announced this morning will give Apple more time to increase production in Vietnam, in India, and also they mentioned they have some manufacturing presence in the United States. They can increase that as well. They have 90 more days to increase that production, right? It takes time to increase production in these facilities. 90 days is a lot of time for a company as powerful as Apple with the resources that Apple has to increase production. And they can also front load inventory. They already talked about how they front loaded a lot of the inventory to get ahead of the tariffs. They can do that again over the next 90 days, buy up and produce a lot of inventory to get it into the United States before the 90 days are up so that it has even more time to increase production outside of China to avoid those large tariffs that are very focused on China. China faces the largest tariffs out of any other country before the 145% tariffs were on pause. So this was more great news for Apple stock investors. I think with this 90-day pause, the company has plenty of time to mitigate even more of these tariff-related costs and get their manufacturing um, more diversified outside of China. Now, Apple didn't feel comfortable predicting the mix of production in the future, but you can estimate reasonably that this is the strategy they will employ is to diversify away from China, to increase manufacturing in India, in Vietnam, and in the United States as much as it can, and then front load the inventory as much as it can to avoid those tariffs. So another thing investors were curious about with Apple is um, customer behavior. Did they notice customers buying up iPhones and iPads and computers before tariffs went into effect? And the reason they're concerned about that is because that would mean that in the current quarter or in future quarters, sales would be noticeably lower because everyone that wanted to buy product already bought it in the current quarter. And then in future quarters, sales would be lower. But Apple says, the CEO says that we don't believe we saw obvious evidence of a significant pull forward in demand in the March quarter due to tariffs, but Apple themselves did pull inventory ahead. So Apple has a lot more inventory because they wanted to build up inventory before the tariffs went into effect. And so that's going to relieve some of the tariff costs for Apple in the upcoming quarter. And then they have 90 days to pull ahead even more inventory and thereby give themselves a lot more time. So the recent developments, again, is evidence of Apple's exceptional management team in dealing with unprecedented circumstances effectively. Hey everyone, I'm excited to announce that my book is finally available for sale. I've been working on it for more than a year now, so I'm really excited to finally share this with you now. It goes through my framework for evaluating stocks. Some of you often ask why I like this stock or why I like the other stock, and this framework provides you the things that I look at when I'm evaluating stocks. I've added the link in the description below.